If you have the agenda, please be aware that case number 2877, 140 on Meadow Lane, has been withdrawn. That does not need a motion or anything, it's been withdrawn. We have two decisions, 2882, William and Sharon Jacob, 52 Bishop's Lane. You gonna make the motion?
I move that, we can do one at a time.
Yeah.
I move that we accept the first decision, Sharon
Second.
William Jacob, as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. All
Case
right.
number 2885, By the Way, LLC, 171 Wine Dance Lane.
And I move that we accept that decision as written.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
By the way.
That brings us down to the pending cases, the first one being 2879, Halcyon Lodge LLC, 436 Gin Lane. For the applicant. Mary Jane, is that you?
Good evening. Mary Jane Asato of Brookline and Asato, 21 South Main Street, for the applicant. Melissa Dedovich, our environmental consultant, is here, as well as representatives from the architect's office are here as well, in case you had any further questions. The application that you first heard in June has been amended, and rather than go through the prior variances, it's amended to include coastal erosion hazard area variance from the dune area requirements, since obviously we're within the dune area of the coastal erosion hazard area, so that we can do this renovation, demolition, addition of this historic building. The building is where it is. It's been deemed historic by the Architectural Review Board. We submitted those decisions at the prior hearing. Moreover, you have in hand supplementing our historic consultant's letter saying that the situs of the building as is important to maintaining its historic nature, and therefore it's not recommended for it to be moved. There are practical reasons that it cannot be moved, is that we are moving all the septic field, as you can see from the maps, northward. We're sort of sandwiched between the ocean dunes and the wetlands across the street from Gin Lane. So practically speaking, even if it wasn't essential to the historic preservation for this building, trying to move it forward sort of has difficulties with the upgraded septic system, and we would need more setback relief from the wetlands if at all possible, it was even for the septic to come north. The other thing would be that this building is higher. It's pre-existing non-conforming as to height, and obviously if you move it forward toward the street, it's going to have more of a presence as far as visual impact. So we submit to you that because of the historic nature and preserving the historic significance of this building, as well as the practical limitations as far as where to relocate the upgraded sanitary system that's proposed, and it takes up a huge area here, and together with the fact that of its pre-existing height, we submit to you that respectfully request that the coastal erosion hazard area relief from the dune area be granted. We have also, since June, there's been a Skyplane FEMA pyramid law passed, and the project, let me just, let me get the plan. As you know, we're taking down the Philip Johnson wing and adding, replacing it with a more architecturally conforming, architecturally compatible addition. Here's the Philip Johnson wing, and we've actually computed the new Skyplane law, the 33-degree angles, 5 feet up, and there was only a tiny, like little corner. It's not even that's non-conforming. When this is taken down and we put in an architecturally compatible, historically compatible addition, because of this roof line, we have this roof, and there's no living space there, by the way, all right? It's just roof space and dormer space I think if I would just give you, I will show you the colored rendering. Hold on, I'm sorry.
1925.
Pardon me?
1925.
No, but I want to show them the color. It's 1,925 cubic square feet. And here is the sort of three-dimensional area that reflected. This is the proposed gabled roof area, and there's a hip dormer here and a shed dormer in back. So this whole area, the proposed gable being 1,650 cubic feet, the hip dormer being 125 cubic feet, and the shed dormer being 150 cubic feet, for a total of 1,925 cubic feet. And that is the variance that has been added, and the application is amended, and it's been duly published to make it historically more compatible with what's existing out there versus the flat roof.
You
The-
said that there's no living area up there.
No living area,
Unfinished space.
unfinished space.
So the
for
shed
the-
dormer and the other dormer are just for show? Just for looks?
Just to
for-
make it look like
Yeah,
it works
okay.
with the other.
It's
With the main
to
house.
sort of
Right.
make it cohesive with the main house. It follows the detailing on the main house, and so that it balances. So it's an architectural component. Also, as we can see, a flat roof here, apparently, from what I hear from architects as well as historian, it doesn't work as far as the historic compatibility is what I'm told. So they matched, this design was to basically take it back to be more historically accurate of this era of architecture,
But
Victorian.
would you consider a hip roof?
I will have to have the architect answer that. They said, could you consider a hip roof?
You can't talk about that.
We could that be reviewed in the architectural review board, or does it need to be reviewed at this time?
I mean,
Well, that's the whole area that's in a sky plane, it's because of the gable. And if it was a hip, it would mitigate a lot of that. Maybe not all of it, but really cut back on,
We'll need to talk to our
historical
historical
consultant.
consultant to
I mean,
understand if,
This is why this.
The architectural review, the conditional decision that was given had asked the architect and the owner to have a dialogue with Zach Studenroth, not at the end, but during the entire course of designing. And per that recommendation, our historical consultant has been in dialogue during this development phase to see what would be historically acceptable, because he is the ARB's consultant, and the decision itself that granted the conditional demolition for this said, we are telling you to be, from the very beginning concept design process, to be in dialogue with Zach Studenroth, which we have, and this is what the two consultants have sort of settled on, and which is pending before the Architectural Review Board. So, I mean, have we considered a hip roof? This has come about between an ongoing dialogue between Zach Studenroth and the ARB and our architects and architectural consultants. So I submit that, yes, it is a variance from the pyramid that's been passed recently, but this development has been in process even before that time, and would like for you to give some consideration, since it's to preserve this historic building.
Well, you're taking down that wing, that's an improvement right there.
That's, well, there's some difference of opinion, but
There
we
is?
concur with you on that.
and then if it's not, and it's non-living area, so you space you don't need, it's an aesthetic,
It's an
but
aesthetic.
I'm not convinced that a gable versus a nice hip might be just as acceptable. So that maybe, if you get some input back on that, I mean, if there's some kind of big red flag about that, I'd like to know what it is.
I guess my only comment would be that right now, other than a few small dormers with a hip, the main structure has no hip roofs. It's a true gable. So architecturally, we're trying to match this aesthetic that we have on the north and south of the building on the eastern side, so that it truly has sort of the correct view, especially as you're coming down Old Town Road and you really see that wing of the house.
Do the lower porch roofs have hips on them?
These,
The lower porch roofs?
the porch roofs do, yes.
All right,
But
so-
I meant, sorry, the main
I
upper
understand,
roof
you
structure,
know,
yeah.
okay.
It really would be something that the architectural historians would have to discuss, because this has been ongoing for over a year now.
We can always, when we finish the next year, we can adjourn it, and you can
Okay.
have a discussion with the.
I know it's in the regulations, it's just, it's a lot of relief.
Well, I mean, it appears, I mean, it's almost 2,000 cubic square feet, we understand that. But I thought that considering that it's in conjunction with the historic preservation of this building and total renovation, and it's been encouraged, and the fact that, I mean, I'm not saying that, this is a recent law, but it's been a long process coming forward here, and this was passed, 2 weeks ago? So I really, really would ask some indulgence at this stage, because we do have this pending before the Architectural Review Board, and it has been done as recommended throughout the year in conjunction with Zach Studenroth's direct input.
And we were involved in the exemption hearings in the.
I don't think that it would
This has been
set
going
any
on.
precedent here because, one, it's very, very, I mean, this is being deemed historic in the village, has been encouraged that there's no demolition, and that we should do a compatible renovation and addition. So the applicant is really has made a concerted effort throughout to be able, to do that. So,
You're saving the house, right?
yes, we're
Yes.
saving the house.
I think that's important.
It's very,
And, I mean, there is some allowances, even in the FEMA regulations, because of historic, there's exemptions there. I mean, the ARB made it very, very, very clear over a lengthy process that they wanted this house saved.
Right.
I think it should also be noted too that the main house, although that's not FEMA compliant, the new addition will be FEMA compliant. That's why it's also high too.
Yeah, well, I know, it's sprung on you late.
The new
whole
addition will be FEMA
process,
compliant.
All of a sudden, you get your
Right.
old, you-
And it's
year and a
certainly-
half of planning, and then a new law comes
Yeah,
into effect.
and it's lower
Yeah.
it's lower than what's out there. And not that it's, this board shouldn't be swayed by it, but the neighbors who have all been shown this plan. In fact, if you recall, at the last meeting I was here, a neighbor 2 doors down, who has usually been very vocal in opposition to other applications, submitted a letter in complete support of this application. And he's actually the neighbor that's going to be more, directly impacted. So I submit to you that we've sent out notices now twice. I mean, obviously, there was the first public hearing, we've republished this, and we've only gotten positive feedback from those who are going to be affected.
And I have met with with the attorney representing the property owner to the east and shown them the elevations too. And we've had no feedback, negative or otherwise.
That's the house that's going up now. right?
Correct.
Anything else? Bruce?
I just wanted to point out that the additional wetland setbacks is a direct result of what the Suffolk County Department of Health Services wanted. So the wetland setback variance to 198.4 feet from Old Town Road for the eastern septic system leaching galley. They wanted, the Health Department wanted that there. So obviously, we're here before you to add that variance. And the dune crest setback variance to 50.3 feet for the eastern roof dry well. And that is also because we had to make adjustments at the request of the Health Department. However, there has been a decrease to 189.2 feet from what we've asked for before, from 191.2 feet for the eastern expansion galley. So these changes are because the Health Department basically said, this is what we want. We had several meetings with them. We explained to them that we were truly between a rock and a hard place between dunes and wetlands. And so this was, these are the 3 items that they would not budge on. So those have been added, but I still submit to you, I mean, it is a totally upgraded system, both for the cottage as well as the house. When the existing septic system for the house or cesspools are banked into the dunes, at this juncture. And so, and we're abandoning even the cottage cesspool system. That is all being upgraded, even though we're not really making any changes to that cottage structure. And this, as you can see, it's rather challenging with all the shallow pools and how it's been set up with the dry wells, et cetera. So, submit to you that under the circumstances of historic nature, as well as the upgrades and the limitations that we have, that the board grant the relief that's been requested.
Harry, you have any?
No.
Dan, anything else?
You had said that the cottage, you're upgrading the septic system for the
Yes.
cottage? Is that going to be then piped into the house septic system?
No,
It doesn't show us.
No, it does.
No.
What it does is gonna be, there's an ejector pump right here, because we worked with so it's actually being pumped up here, and it's gonna be part of the split system for the
That's what
house.
said they're going to
Yes,
then
yeah,
pump
right
it
up.
up to the house
We're
system.
gonna try to split it, but really we couldn't with the 200-foot wetland setback, so.
Rick?
No questions, all the things they filed since our last hearing, address all the questions that I raised at the first hearing.
Chick?
No, we had looked at this before. We understand the health department modifications. I don't have any further questions.
Is there anyone out in the audience like to heard of this application? Therefore, you want to hold this for decision?
It's up to you guys.
I have a motion to hold for decision.
I move that we hold this application with decision.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Just to give you a heads up, you'll actually have a decision at the next meeting. Would be up in the air because I'm going to be away for a couple of weeks in September, and
How dare you?
I get back shortly before the zoning board meeting, so I doubt that this will be the first thing on my file.
On the application of case number 2881, 9 Main Street LLC, 9 Main Street.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. DePietris, Monica Navia, Burke and Sullivan, 41 Meeting House Lane, Southampton, for the applicant, 9 Main Street LLC. The property is located on Main Street, known as 9 Main Street. It is a one-story building occupied as a retail establishment. It consists of an area of 3,822 square feet. The existing building has an area of 2,793 square feet. It is virtually the only one-story building in the vicinity of Main Street. We are proposing to add a second floor to the existing building, and it already has received approval from the planning board and preliminary approval from the Suffolk County Health Department to upgrade the current block system to a system meeting current health department standards. Of course, the installation of the sanitary system is subject to approval by the Board of Trustees, and thus we appeared on behalf of the applicant before the Board of Trustees, and at that time, the trustees indicated that, of course, subject to conditions, that they would approve the installation of the sanitary system within the right-of-way of West Main Street. They also indicated that any final approval would only be considered after the determination by all boards having jurisdiction of this application. So, gentlemen, since this proposal seeks an increase of retail space over what now exists, we are required under the village code to provide additional parking for the proposed second-story addition. Due to the size of the property and the existing building, establishing on-site parking to accommodate the additional parking is not possible. Accordingly, why we're here today, the variance from that requirement is necessary. We believe that is the only variance that is necessary. So as we stated before, the property fronts on Main Street, and the rear of the property is adjacent to West Water Street, with direct access to the existing village public parking field. On the rider to the application, which you should have, we did submit that, we have set out what we believe to be the requirements for the proposed addition. We believe that the existing one-story retail space has a grandfathered right to 15 spaces. Part of the proposal is to establish a sitting area where patrons or those who are with them and may wish to sit could have a cup of coffee or a cold drink. It's merely a convenience, a courtesy. For example, if you're shopping with your significant other and you don't feel like trailing them as they're doing all their shopping, you can just pull over, have a cup of coffee. There's no intention to advertise this separately nor make it available to other patrons other than the ones that are within the retail store. We felt it important to disclose this intention for purposes of full disclosure, not only to this board, but to the planning board and to the Suffolk County Health Department. Therefore, as you can note in the rider that we attached to our application, we calculated parking requirements, treating this very small area as both retail space and restaurant space. Again, since this area will not be open to the public, and it's not really any different than a sitting or waiting area, which you often find in conjunction with other establishments, for example, a car dealership. They have courtesy coffee, water. They don't need a server. You can just help yourself. It's merely just a courtesy to the patrons and whoever's accompanying them. Thus, we believe the area should be considered a retail space. If this board agrees, then the waiver of parking spaces would be 4 regular spaces and 1 truck space. Otherwise, the waiver of parking spaces, of course, would be 6 regular spaces and 1 truck space. Since the proposed expansion will result in additional retail space as opposed to office space, it furthers the objectives, we believe, that are consistent with the village master plan for Main Street. Also, the intended use is not necessarily a specific destination, but will actually be complementary to the village shopping area. So that, coupled with the proximity to existing public parking, we believe will not unduly burden or exacerbate any traffic problems. And last but not least, the proposed expansion would result in the existing building being more conforming to the present code in terms of desired architecture. So thus, we are requesting a waiver of parking spaces to 4 regular spaces, and we're also requesting relief for 1 truck loading space or determination that the proposed second-story addition, being less than 5,000 square feet, does not require us to provide a truck loading space. But we leave that to your discretion.
So the upstairs is only to be like a waiting room or a lounge, or
No, it'll be a retail space.
you'll be selling up there also?
Correct.
Okay.
So the total,
Is there an elevator, or is there going to be an elevator or just stairs?
I will confirm that. I believe just stairs, but I'm going to confirm that.
and so you're basically doubling the retail space?
Correct. So
But the
the
juice bar is going to take up a portion of this retail space.
very, very small portion, and it would
Well,
just
it
be
says 16
coffee.
seats, and so I don't know if that means tables. Can you tell me how many can you let us know how many square feet?
16 seats, and let's see. It should be in the survey. I'll confirm the exact square footage of that. Again, it would probably be 3 to 4 tables at 3 people each. And again, it's only for convenience, a courtesy to customers who are waiting or their
Yeah,
companions.
a quick question about it. So, basically, it's only to be used by shoppers buying these dry goods.
Correct.
So, but is it free to the customers? or-
Yes, yes. It's like, for example, if you go into a car dealership, I know when I go into my car dealership, while I sit there and wait, I can go get a cup of coffee, some water. It's sort of a self-serve. There's not going to be a server or anything.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of businesses are doing that, offering
Yeah,
that.
yeah, it's just a courtesy, convenience
And that's on the first floor, you're gonna have this coffee juice bar, right?
Yes. First floor proposed coffee juice bar, 16 seats.
To the back of the establishment? I'd like to know where that, you know.
Yeah, towards the back. And again, it won't be available to the public, only as a
I know that you
convenience.
have a floor plan of the first floor, because when Tim McCully came before the Board of Trustees last year for a starting point for preliminary stuff having to do with the septic system,
Right.
he showed a floor plan to the Board of Trustees. I don't know if that floor plan has changed or if it remains the same, but obviously from the zoning board's questions, if you filed copies of that floor plan, then the board would have a better idea of what you're talking about.
We did.
No, if you filed it with the zoning board. The zoning board does not have any copies of the floor plan.
You don't? Okay. I will make sure you get that. And you're definitely positive about that, right? Because we submitted a lot. Our application is,
Okay, well, it's not in my packet.
No, I don't have a floor plan.
I haven't seen it.
okay, I'll confirm and I will submit one. Would you like to see it now?
You can
A
have
copy of
it
it?
there.
Yeah.
Well, usually you get copies for all the board
We
members
need
anyway.
copies for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I can have one and submit that at a later point.
Yeah, fine.
And then you talked about a truck loading spot somewhere, but
Right, I mean, under the code, it says if it's,
They're asking for a variance from that requirement.
Yeah,
right, 5,000 to 14,000 square feet, you need one truck loading, and this is under 5,000. So we're asking, we don't necessarily need one, but we leave that to your discretion.
I'm not
But
asking
it's-
to waive the fee, are you?
No.
you,
We're
it's a
paying
lot
the
of,
fee.
it's a lot of retail space that you're gonna replenish and restocking, so how was all that replenishing and stocking getting into this building? Through the front door? I mean,
Right,
I mean, right now, we get UPS trucks
Right,
blocking
and-
up Main Street, you know, so,
and you're absolutely right, I mean, it's just under 5,000, so we might as well get the truck loading space.
There's a back door that opens up onto West Main
Yes.
Street?
Mm-hmm.
So they actually could come through the back door with
Yeah.
the stock.
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't show how that would sort of happen.
Well, maybe if we saw the floor plan, that may show that
Maybe,
too.
yeah,
Yeah, I will get that too.
but I think it would be, I know you're asking for relief about it, I don't know how I feel about that. but
Yeah, I mean, it's not
big
at
retail
all,
Space, you know,
it's just under the 5,000, so we don't need relief
There's
from
no
that.
place where they could put the parking.
Yeah.
There is no.
well, I mean, it's a space in the back where you could have a loading, you know, so.
I mean, our intent is,
There's a door in the back, you said, right?
right, ultimately, our intent is just to have this area not classified as a restaurant or cafe. It's merely a retail convenience, and that's why we're asking for a waiver of the 4 parking spaces.
Everything else?
Hmm.
Jerry?
What are you gonna sell? Do you know what the product is?
It's gonna be, I believe, I know I'm on the record, high-end fashion clothing
Oh, okay.
of some sort, hopefully, but I will confirm with that with you when I know. We're still waiting to get a tenant, but it should be fashion-oriented. If I have any say in it.
Just imagine what the rent will be. Rick, did you have anything?
Couple of questions. Number one, your application talks about a juice coffee service area. So there will be no food service, just juice or coffee?
Coffee, juice, water. If there are pastries in a package, you know, like when you go into a car dealership, they have like biscotti.
You're gonna have to tell us what you're asking for, because food service could make it more
Right.
complicated.
That would be the very most to have like
Okay.
pastries, but
You-
at this
you-
point,
you-
it's just coffee and juice.
Okay, so, we should look at it as just coffee and juice. That's what
Yes.
you're asking for. You're not asking for food service.
Correct, correct.
Okay.
No cooking.
No cooking at all.
What else did I have? According to the application, the planning board granted site plan approval back in April.
Correct.
What did the planning board do with secret?
Let's see. Well, they receive approval from the planning board and preliminary approval from the Suffolk County Health Department.
That wasn't my question.
Right, I don't have an answer, and I will look into that and get
I don't
one
know if the
back.
planning board classified this as a type 2 action under secret, or whether they did a negative declaration. Something must have been done,
And I will find that out and
we
have
need
the
to know.
answer.
so that we can ascertain whether we need to do anything.
Right, I will find out and have that answer for you.
And, let me just see. Somewhere in the application, it was mentioned, I think that, well, it's been a while since we looked at this, because it was on for an initial hearing
Yes, it's the
back in
first
June,
time
but it
before
got-
you.
we didn't have a hearing in June or
Right.
July, it got adjourned, so I'm trying to remember what my other
Yes.
questions were.
And I'm also
Uh,
of counsel and working with Tim McCully, who would have also wanted to be here, but he was in Sag Harbor in front of the board there.
I think
so-
somewhere in the application, you mentioned that the proposed addition is consistent with the master plan update for the village business district?
Yes.
I think you said something to that effect, and I'm just wondering, you're complying with everything that's in the amended VB district regulations resulting from that update?
Yes, but if we're not, I will make sure we do.
Okay, well, I'm asking, are you?
Yes, yes.
Have you had a chance to look at it from that point of view?
No, I haven't, Rick.
I don't know if the planning board did.
I can certainly find out
Okay.
at the board an update.
Okay, I would suggest that you take the amended provisions that came from that master plan update that are in the zoning code and specifically tell us
Mm-hmm.
that you're complying with all of those.
Okay.
Or if you're not, you're not, so that we don't lose track of something.
Okay,
My guess is, since the planning board approved it, that you're okay, but,
yeah, I will confirm and make sure.
okay, but do it specifically.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will.
I guess that's all the questions I had.
Is there anyone out in the audience wish to be heard to this application? Therefore, I assume we're going to adjourn this for all purposes. Correct?
Yes.
I move we adjourn this for all purposes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
That brings us down to the new cases. First one being 2884 Sam Bob Incorporated, 473 Hill Street, regarding 475 Hill Street. Just to make you aware, this is not an application for a variance. This is an application of appeal from a decision by the building inspector. Little different than the usual applications for variance relief. Mr. Bregman, did you get the letter from John Foster, the building inspector?
Did not. I checked this morning and there was,
Would you like to see it?
There's
Would
nothing
you
in
like a
it.
copy?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, there's a few in there. Okay, take that one.
Do you have another copy of that letter?
What?
Do you have another copy of that letter from John?
Yeah.
May I keep this with me while I'm...
Sure.
Yes. Good evening, Eric Bregman, Farrell Fritz, representing the applicant, or the appellant, I guess is the right phrase. I've handed out to you copies of the survey that are in the application, showing what I believe is the front yard definition. The issue here on this survey is whether or not the proposed garage here in this corner of the property is in fact in the front yard and therefore needs a variance and can't be approved, and whether the lot coverage is properly calculated because it does not include the patio, which my understanding is a stone patio, for and around the pool and the pool house. Those are the two legal issues.
Well, what's been the history of this village with patios and walkways at grade?
The building inspector has said, excuse me one second. I also just am handing out copies of the relevant portions of the code, just for your convenience. The building inspector has said, and I think he repeated it in his letter, that he doesn't believe this is the front yard, and that lot coverage doesn't include patios. And that he says that is his traditional view and the way he's interpreted the code. I don't disagree with his statement of tradition. I disagree with his interpretation. If you look at, let's talk about the garage first. The definition of front yard, which is in front of you, it's an open occupied space on the same lot with the building, situated between the nearest roof portion of the principal building and the front lot line of the lot, and extending from side lot line to side lot line. Then section 116-9 of the code says that accessory buildings, specifically including private garages, shall not be placed within a front yard. I don't see how there's anything but, you have a side lot line, a front lot line, and the building is here.
Okay, let me interrupt you right there, because I can't see what you're holding up.
I left
But-
that right with you, right there, Rick.
Okay. If I'm looking at the survey that you handed in correctly,
Yes,
the right-of-way extends from the southeast corner for, looks like ballpark, about 60 feet.
I think it's 80, yes, 68, yes.
Okay, so that of the the southerly line of about 145.41 feet. 60 feet of that southerly line fronts on the right-of-way, and the other 85 feet of that southerly line does not front on a right-of-way.
That's correct.
Okay, so under the zoning code, that 60 feet is the front lot line, not the whole 145 feet. The other 85 feet of the southerly line is a side lot line.
So we then have,
The zoning code specifically says that
yes,
any lot line, not a rear lot line nor a front lot line, is deemed a side lot line.
well,
And the front lot line is the street right-of-way line. So this property has 3 side lot lines: the easterly line, the westerly line, and 85 feet of the southerly line.
well, then it must have, then, what happens if the lot line stops here, is what you're saying?
I'm just telling you what the zoning code says.
Well, the front lot line says that the front lot line is located by finding the street right-of-way. It doesn't say that the front lot line has to have a street the whole way across. For example, if you had a,
The way, I've been village attorney since 1993, the way a lot like this has been interpreted by the building department for over 20 years is the way I just described it to you.
explain to me then, I mean, I have trouble with that because,
You can make any argument you want. I'm just pointing that out because you did not mention in your application the zoning code provision that says that any lot line, not a front lot line or a rear lot line, is deemed a side lot line.
no,
And under that provision, 85 feet of the southerly line is a side lot line. You can take your argument wherever you want to from there, but I just wanted you to be sure that you understood that.
I understood that, and I understand the definitions. It also, to me, makes no sense if this, where the red line is, Rick, if I may, and gentlemen on the board, that red line, according to you, would extend 60 feet to the west, right, from the eastern side, and then it would just stop. So the front yard is only in that one section? Is there yet another lot line that goes from the building to the front yard lot line, and it becomes a side yard lot line? What is this area over here? Is it side yard? And does it stop? If it stops, then there has to be a...
The way the building department has interpreted the zoning code for some 20 years is the way the building inspector has interpreted it in this case. The garage is not in a front yard.
I understand that, and I think, and I'm suggesting to you that that's incorrect. Now, you don't have to agree with me, but if you have a front yard over here, what is this over here? From 60 feet to 85 feet, or for that 85 feet?
All I'm doing, you can make whatever arguments you want to make, the board will render a decision.
That's...
I'm just making you aware. I'm just making you aware of a provision in the zoning code that you haven't mentioned, and the interpretation of that for some 20 years.
Okay. I apologize for not mentioning specifically that everything that is not a front yard line is or a rear yard line is a side yard line. I don't see any side yard line dividing this part of the front yard from that part of the front yard. It makes no sense to me. If it's a side yard, then you have 5 side yards, and you have part of the house in the
The
side yard.
garage is not between the house and the front lot line, to state it a different way.
Well, and they rarely are. But the purpose,
Oh, yeah, in a normal lot that has street frontage all the way across, all of this is front yard. If the whole southerly line were a front lot line, the garage would be in the front yard between the house and the street. But in this case, it's not.
And you have a definition of a front yard, of the front yard, that says the lot line goes from side yard to side yard. So where does this line that goes from this side yard, we agree, stop? In the middle of the lot?
Eric, make whatever
Okay,
arguments you want.
that's that is the argument, Rick. The argument is that you have a definition that it says goes from side yard to side yard, right? A side lot line to side lot line. And the only way you can do that is to go all the way across. Now, I understand that I'm running uphill on tradition here, and that this has been decided in lots of ways. But the purpose of that front yard setback is to separate accessory buildings from the roads and from the people next to it. All right? This makes, if this is a side yard and that's a side yard, he can be 15 feet from one and 15 feet from the other. That's closer than makes any sense. The whole point is to have accessory buildings behind, if you will, from the front lot line and further back than the principal building, because it's all.
I understand your argument, and if you took that and you took a regular house on a regular street,
Right.
not a flagpole lot or a private road, but the village is full of irregular lots, flagpole, private roads, so, and then you're taking a code, the way I see it, which applies perfectly well to a house that has complete frontage on a public road. And when you get a house that's 3 houses deep on a piece of property, it's, you look at it differently, and that's, I think, how the village has done it, so.
Well, that's not how the village does it if you have a flag lot. They say if you have a front yard, you can choose which is your front
Okay, but on the
yard.
flagpole lot provision, the entire lot line is the front lot line,
Right.
not just the street right-of-way line. In the case of this lot, the front lot line is 60 feet wide. That's it. It's not 145 feet wide. And that's what you're ignoring.
Okay.
Make
I
your
mean,
arguments.
We've made the arguments.
No,
right?
I'm
And
just telling you what the
Right.
interpretation
We've
has
made-
been and how it got there.
I understand that's been the interpretation, and I understand, and I guess you guys understand by now that I think that interpretation is wrong because you have a front yard definition going side yard to side yard. This doesn't. It puts the garage on top of my client's property, or much closer to it than it otherwise would be, all right? And it enables the property to be, I believe, overdeveloped. But that's beside the point. This is a legal issue, not a design issue. The point of this is to get those houses back, that accessory structures, behind the lot line and behind the principal building. This doesn't do that, and the interpretation doesn't do it. And
Does.
What?
It does. In this case, the house is approximately 40 feet from the street right-of-way line, and the garage is approximately 51 feet from the street right-of-way line. The garage is further from the street right-of-way line than the house. That's the purpose of the front yard provision, and it's fully met.
If that's your decision, all I can do is repeat myself, or if that's the board's decision, you understand that it doesn't jibe with a side lot line to side lot line definition of the front lot line, because there is no side lot line or side yard line in the middle of this lot.
This letter that I mentioned from the building inspector refutes what Mr. Bregman is saying in regard to the front lot line and also in regard to counting patios and pathways as lot coverage.
Well,
Just so everybody knows what's in that letter.
if we can go to, because I see you have a big calendar, I'll be quickly. If we can go to the coverage and the pool patio, you understand that first, Lot coverage is defined as the portion of lot area covered by an area of a building or buildings or a structure or structures. That's in my application. It's also in the handout today, just copied for you. A structure is anything, and I emphasize that, constructed or erected on or under the ground or upon another structure or building, excluding driveways constructed at natural grade. So the only exclusion, it's anything. All right, it's very clear about that. And the only exclusion is driveways. If they wanted to exclude patios, they could, but they didn't. And they made exclusions for what they wanted to make an exclusion of, that is driveways. There has been, I am told, another interpretation that if the
For 20 years, at least.
I understand that, all right? And I'm perfectly happy to have the code changed if somebody
Well,
thinks
there
this
are
is
ways
wrong.
to do that if you want to go through the procedure of having the code changed.
No, I
But
believe the
This
code.
board does not change the code, obviously.
Of course not. And I'm suggesting that the code, that if you have a patio, for example, there's another interpretation that says that if the patio is 12 inches off the ground, it counts
Deck.
for lot coverage,
It becomes a deck.
all right?
It becomes a deck then.
I understand that. So what's the difference?
It's not at ground level.
I don't see anything that says anything about anything except driveways constructed at natural grade. Doesn't say patio at ground level. It doesn't say a trellis at, which may be a ground level and sticking up.
It has always been interpreted that way. I've sat here for 30 years, and I have never had a case where patios and walkways were considered lot coverage.
You folks understand my position?
We understand
I
your
think you
position, sure
understand.
we do.
I think the definitions are fairly clear. I think that the interpretation has been wrong, and in this case, it leads to an unfortunate result. But, and that's why we're here, this is not an effort to do in this Mr. Gary's project. It's an effort to make it more fitting for the neighborhood and frankly, smaller in mass and size, which were also may or may not be resolved by the ARB. But that's what we're about here. I think the interpretation that has, however long it's been, is wrong in the face of the code on both issues.
That it?
That's it.
I will do that. I'm Bob Pressman, the applicant. I live next door. When I built the garage, I went in front of you, I had to get a variance. And the reason why I had to get a variance was that my garage was in front of the house. Now, this house next door, it doesn't need a variance to build a garage in front. Next door to me, on the same street, I don't understand it. Thank you.
Rick, did you have anything else?
Nope.
Is there anybody else who wants to heard of this application? You want to close this for decision?
Yes.
I move to close this for decision.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
May I get a copy of this? I guess there's no copier available.
I just gave you that one.
Is that, can I get this?
You can have that one.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you. May I also ask a favor for a copy of the decision for my partner in the Jacob case? If that's all right.
Yes.
Thank you.
On the application of case number 2886, Capital Telecom and Singular Wireless, 153 Powell Avenue.
Good evening. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is John Coughlin. I'm the attorney for the applicants. And the mailing and posting, thank you. We're here this evening on behalf of Capital Telecom and New Singular Wireless, who's also known as AT&T, seeking a special permit from this board. We've also submitted an application to the planning board for site plan approval. I would submit, Mr. DePietris reminded me that I would submit, I believe, that this board should take lead agency status, as I would say the use is the prime relief that we need from the village in support of the application, but they have not yet commenced secret review as far as I know. AT&T, the co-applicant, is licensed by the FCC to construct, maintain, and operate a wireless telecommunications system throughout New York, in Suffolk County, and across the country. Currently, AT&T has a wireless facility at the Cablevision Tower at 281 David White's Lane. However, due to the end of the landlord-tenant relationship between Cablevision and AT&T, that existing wireless facility is going away for AT&T, and they need to replace and replicate the coverage that they currently provide to the residents and constituents of the village and those around the village. I would note that AT&T, under New York State case law, is considered a public utility for zoning purposes, and that, as such, they strive to provide reliable service to the areas that they do serve. Currently, the village enjoys this coverage. This is a unique application that frequently we come before boards such as this, explaining to you how there is a dire gap in coverage and there's a need to fill that gap. This is the mirror image of that type of application. We have a facility that provides great coverage in the vicinity of the Cablevision Tower that is going away. The propagation maps that have been submitted to the board show in sequence what the network would look like if that site goes away without replacement. And there would result a huge gap in the current reliable served network. I have with me a team of individuals who prepared various materials, most of which are before the board already. I do have some additional reports that I'd like to hand up for the board's consideration. I can do that as each of the witnesses come up to explain to you a little bit about the analysis they have done, or I can do it all in one fell swoop, if you'd prefer.
I guess you can do it all in one fell swoop.
Very good. The first item that I have is a radio frequency engineering affidavit from Neil Arcio. This is an affidavit that covers those same propagation maps that the board has already seen. In the affidavit, you'll see that Mr. Arcio goes into a little bit more narrative detail about the way, really about how the maps read and what they show. So I have each one.
So are these things that you're handing up are in addition to what you've already given us?
Yes, Counsel. The next item I have is an affidavit from Tom McGrath. He's a real estate specialist who, on behalf of AT&T, analyzed the area for potential locations for the replacement facility. Obviously, the subject proposal was identified as being optimal, but his analysis speaks to some of the other considered properties in the area. Similarly, I have an affidavit from Vince Casero from Capital Telecom, and his affidavit talks about some of the other properties they considered before the subject Gem Powell lot was identified as being the optimal site location to replace the Cablevision Tower. This next item is a visual evaluation report. The board has already seen the photo simulations of what the proposed facility would look like if erected, but this has a little bit, again, a little bit more narrative information as to the analysis from a planning and environmental standpoint that was undertaken and the findings based on what those photo simulations show. And the last new item that I have this evening is a real estate consulting report. This is from Mike Lynch. He's a New York State licensed real estate appraiser. And in this analysis, he studies comparable wireless facilities and has determined that the proposed site will not have a negative impact on real estate values. And Mr. Lynch is here tonight as well. If it pleases the board, what I'd like to do is have Mike Patel come up. He is from Tectonic. It's the engineering company that prepared the plans that are before you, and he can talk to you a little bit about the site design and general site layout.
See, you're trying to drown us with paperwork, is that the idea here?
Not the intention. It seems like the village's special permit application doesn't necessarily anticipate something as unique as this type, and we'd rather have you have all the information that you need.
Thank you.
In other words, right.
So my name is Mike Patel. I'm working with a firm named Tectonic Engineering. Our office is in Newburgh, New York. We are the firm who prepared the plans that are in front of you that were submitted as part of the application. It shows the layout of the property and the proposed AT&T site on that property. I have some presentation board. I'll just walk the board through some of the drawings that we have put together. So part of the package, there is a site plan drawing that was submitted to the board. Just shows the overall property and the location of the proposed compound, which is in the backyard of the property, almost touching the property line in the back, right next to the railroad tracks. The proposed compound is just over 4,000 square feet. It will be surrounded by board-on-board wooden fence, and will house the AT&T equipment on ground. We'll have some electronic equipment. It will also house the 165-foot pole structure to hold the antennas at that height. A detailed plan of the compound is also part of the application. It's an irregular corner of the lot, so that the compound itself is also irregular. It's a little over 4,000 square feet. The pole is situated in the back about 25 feet from the rear property line, in the middle of the compound. The AT&T equipment will be on a concrete pad sitting on the ground. The pad is 12 by 24, sitting next to the proposed pole. The pad will have a number of electronic cabinets. That's what AT&T's network requires for the signals and the electronic transmittal and receive of the signal. The pad will also house a backup power generator. In case of the power situation, it provides backup to run the site for about 8 hours. It's a diesel generator with a tank of about 210 gallons. On the same sheet, we also have the full layout of the AT&T concrete pad with all the different cabinets.
Now, this is going to be to the east of the Hillsworth warehouse, is that correct?
To the north,
I'm not
Northeast or?
I'm not sure which.
be the north
which
back
building
corner.
is the-
That's the one, as you go in, the drive is to the left, where all the trucks
This
are
is in
parked.
the northwest corner, so up to the
Be
west.
to north of that,
Right.
but not on that property, it'd be on the adjoining property, is that correct?
No, it's all Roscoe property.
It's all the
Hey,
same.
it's all
lot, yeah.
Roscoe's property?
Yeah, so in that northwest corner of that lot.
So the next sheet I'm talking about here, it just shows the elevation view of the pole structure, shows the antennas at the top. There are 12 antennas proposed with some amplifiers that go behind the antennas. The cables run down inside the pole, so they're not visible from outside. And all will be within 6-foot stockade fence in the back corner of the property. So that's, in a nutshell, a layout of the proposed site in the back corner of the power property. Any questions? I'm here to answer.
It's an AT&T tower. What do they use now? Do they have another tower that they're using presently?
Yes, they're currently providing service to the area from the Cablevision tower on David White's. It's about, I think.
And that's sort of maxed out, is that one?
No, Cablevision is requiring that they leave. They're also, we actually submitted in our application pack, the original one, letters from Sprint and Verizon. They've also been given termination agreements from Cablevision. This facility is being designed so that any of those wireless carriers who are being asked to leave can come on here, so we don't have each carrier coming to this board and to the planning board saying, we would like one at the next industrial property, and the next one, and the next one.
Because then that's my question on the pictures, that you have a good pictorial from all the different angles.
Yes.
And it shows a 165-foot tower with one ring of, I don't know if those are receptors or whatever, antennas on the top. If Sprint and other ones come aboard, does that require additional, like, rings of this equipment?
Yes,
Going
in
down
fact-
underneath that?
We can have Ms. Stipple come up in a second who can speak to the photo simulations, but the concept is such that this is all AT&T at the top. The next 10 feet down, there would be another ring of those antennas. I think that would be Verizon is the next one, and then Sprint, the next one down. They would all be stacked on this tower. None of them would need to go further up. They're all trying to replicate the coverage that they have on the Cablevision tower now, and basically go line for line just over the couple hundred yards that it is to continue serving the community. Those other entities were not yet prepared to join in the application, but we expect that they'll be submitting separate applications in short order. But additionally, the compound that Mr. Patel described, being that larger 4,000 square feet that AT&T is only occupying the 12 by 25 or so of, has enough room within the board-on-board fence and the landscaping that's
you
going
don't
to
have
be
to
proposed.
keep coming
So everyone
back.
can just drop their cabinetry right inside that general leased area and minimize further impact on the property and on the village.
Mr. Coughlin, the Cablevision tower is located in the town, not the village, right?
It is. It's
So-
just over the
So
line.
we're inheriting a town tower that is going away, and by going away, you mean they're going to dismantle it?
No. No, they have not indicated that they intend to dismantle it, just that they are demanding that the wireless carriers come off the tower. There are other antennas that remain on that tower. I would submit that the village already has that tower as a visual asset. It's quite visible throughout the village. I don't think it's going away, at least not in the
What's the height of that
short
tower?
term. 300 plus.
Okay.
The
So
width.
you're half of that.
Yes, yeah. In fact, unless you have any other questions for Mike, I can ask Donna Marie Stippo to come up. She has the photographic simulations. You can see in some of these shots of the surrounding areas the proposed tower relative to the
I have
cable.
some more questions before you bring
Oh,
them
sure.
up. Are you aware that Cablevision did in fact raise their tower in Noyak?
That they raised it? No, I'm not aware of that.
By raising, I mean dismantled.
No.
So it would follow that if they dismantled the one in Noyak, some people say Sag Harbor, it's actually Noyak, it's on Middle Line Highway. That tower was removed when they evicted their tenants. These towers are an invaluable asset to the community. People don't realize what their lives would be like without these towers. Public safety wise and in many other ways. They are really irreplaceable. Why is Cablevision evicting the tenants from that tower?
I do not have the answer to that, but I can tell you an interesting timing coincidence. It was not long after AT&T entered into the termination agreement with Cablevision that Cablevision began marketing its freewheel, Wi-Fi only phone service. I don't know if they're connected, but the timing was such that it raised a question, at least to me, which is why I do not know if they plan to dismantle their own tower.
I would assume they are. They did the one in Sag Harbor that way, and
Yeah.
there's rumors that they're going to do the same in East Quogue.
Yeah, well, I do know that I believe there are 4 facilities, 4 Cablevision towers that AT&T has been terminated, and they are seeking alternate locations because, as you said so eloquently, these are really important to the infrastructure of all these communities that are served, and replacements need to be up and running before they flip the switch, so to speak, and power down those sites and say that you can't operate anymore, and that's why we come before you tonight.
Are the Dolans, the owners of Cablevision, doing this to be belligerent?
I don't know.
It's this whole thing really aggravates me because there's no reason for that tower to go anywhere. There's no reason to dismantle it. It's there legally. It was put up in the 60s, the early 60s. They could sell that tower to Capital, correct?
Sure.
And they're refusing to do that, correct?
As I understand it, they are unwilling to discuss this at all. You know,
Oh,
these
sure.
folks are
Typical Dolan, Cablevision format.
I would imagine that everyone would, at least the carriers, those who are operating, who spent all that money and time and the infrastructure that exists, would rather stay.
Yeah.
But, you know, Capital has come along with a great replacement idea. It's well located, it can replicate the coverage.
I have a question on it, because you talked about the getting rid of that tower, you put up a new tower. This will replicate what you had on the other tower. What about future needs, expansion as cell grows?
Sure.
You know, I mean, even now, I think people say, well, in the summertime, the place gets loaded with people, and it seems like half the time you're waiting forever for your phone to connect. Does this tower, will it expand over what you have now?
It will not. In fact, I think the radio frequency analysis predicts that it will give approximately 94-95% of the coverage currently enjoyed, and that minor difference is just based on the shift in location. It's not going to add coverage to areas that aren't currently served, but it will protect those that already do have and enjoy reliable.
So going forward, you might have to find another spot in
We
Watermill
may
or somewhere
need an
else to
additional.
add additional towers.
Yeah.
But you won't be able to add, like you added rings for Sprint or whoever, you can't then below them add another,
It wouldn't help the coverage
You get-
footprint.
you just get too low? Is
Well,
it-
and once that area is already covered by those higher antennas, that, you know, the area is served. Now, if there is a capacity issue, too many people are using that same tower, that's something that can be addressed, and there are engineering teams that work for AT&T and the other carriers who are constantly looking at that, modifying sites to add capacity if needed. But really, this application is pretty simple. We want to take what's over there,
Okay.
move it to this lot, and make sure that it's seamless, that there isn't a moment in time when someone's calling 911 or when the PD's pinging off that tower and they can't get through. Obviously, we enjoy it for personal and business use, but that's
Well,
the key.
it's even like
importance.
here, we'll get a hurricane and power outage, and sometimes cell phone's the only thing that'll still work.
For sure, yes, sir.
Where is the radio station, the broadcast station, going to wind up that's on the Cablevision tower now?
I don't know. I really don't have any information about what
I've heard
Cablevision-
rumors that they're being evicted as well.
I do
And
not.
that broadcast station certainly does not tie in to their freewheel system.
I am aware just
I mean economically, competitively, in that way.
I am aware that there are other antennas beyond the panel antennas that the carriers propose now on this tower that exist on that Cablevision tower. There are whips and other sorts of things that you can see that don't belong to any of the entities that we've discussed tonight. I believe that Capital and Mike's team could accommodate those folks if they're also evicted. We could figure out a way to make that work again, to minimize the idea that there would be additional tall structures to replace that one. But I really don't have any information on those other tenants.
You mean you could also put like if the police wanted a police
Sure.
band antenna, you could attach it to your tower?
Frequently, we have the wireless carriers working with county, town, village, whatever quasi-municipal entities that need to put their antennas up. It might require a slightly different mount or separation. They use whip antennas, these are panels, but that's something that certainly can be, well,
It doesn't interfere with your equipment.
as long as they're separated, usually it's not an issue.
If the 102.5 broadcast station does get evicted, which I'm assuming is going to happen, you'll have, generally, they need to be at the top of the tower for maximum range and not to interfere with your antennas because it's so powerful, correct?
I think that's right, yes.
Are you going to flange the top of the tower to make it taller in the future? Let's say if the broadcast station needs to put a pylon up there?
It's a possibility, not proposed in this design yet. We are not asking that this to be extended.
Maybe you
but
should put a flange on the top of the pole.
I would imagine that my clients would be agreeable
Listen,
to.
the town has a lot to lose here. Personally, I'm so angry that I think the town of Southampton should go after their license agreement that they have with Cablevision and say, you're evicting all these necessary services that the town relies on. Well, guess what? We're not going to renew your license to operate a utility in the town. That's how angry I am about this. Those people are being belligerent. As I said, they've taken down the tower in Noyak. It was replaced by another smaller tower by a homeowner, believe it or not, on his property. They're just creating havoc, Cablevision is. And I know the radio stations are worried about it. And I think you should put a flange at the top of this pole, if you get it, to accommodate the radio station.
I'm sure that the clients and the property owner would be agreeable to it be conditioned that it could be extended if someone else needs it. Obviously, any
You can't
future
extend it if
applicant.
it's not designed
No,
for
but-
it in the first place.
Exactly, so that it be designed on the front end, and then any future proposal of that type would come back before this board or planning or both, and it would go from there.
Okay, and you haven't spoken yet about a fall zone?
Sure. Well, Mike can talk about that a little bit as well. from an
So,
engineering
this structure was looked at for fall zone is 25 feet from the property line, so the way it's proposed to be designed is to have a fall zone of 20 feet, so it stays within the property. So the way it's designed is that the bottom portion of the tower is made stronger than the top portion. And that's how it, if in an event that it reaches its capacity with the environmental wind loads, the top will topple over on itself. And the top 20 feet will topple on the rest of it. And by doing that, it reduces the loading now, so that it has more capacity. And that's how usually these are designed.
Normally, a municipality would require, if the tower fell over without breaking apart first. Am I right? More often than not, municipalities require the tower be not so tall that it will fall on someone else's property.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Right. And in the industry, I don't think I've been doing it for a little less than 20 years now. I haven't seen a catastrophe failure like that where a tower would fall like a tree.
What wind load is it designed for?
It's designed per the International Building Code and the ANSI TIA, the Telecommunication Industry Association standard, designed for 120 miles per hour wind speed. It's able to withstand up to 120 miles per hour wind speed.
There was a tower in either Selden or Farmingville in 1985, Hurricane Gloria. The hurricane snapped the tower at the base and it fell over just like this. So
Okay.
all these engineering theories about the tower collapsing on itself are false. I have pictures of that tower, the way it fell, and just like this.
Okay,
Snapped
that's
at the
the first
base.
one I'm hearing about.
Was that
In my professional life, I haven't
Was
seen
that a
one.
lattice tower, or
Yes.
was it one of these poles?
Yes.
Yeah,
Believe it or not, it
I
was.
Okay,
believe
so it is.
it's a slight.
And you can't
sorry.
get any stronger than that.
Actually, these are designed. Well, I'll let Mike. He's the engineer speak.
So, right, the lattice tower, if that's what you're referring to, and I'm not familiar with the tower. So they're usually 3 or 4-legged towers. So you have 4 legs or 3 legs that then go up and taper. This structure that we are designing is a 16-sided solid steel pole structure. So they're not individual small pipes. This is one big pole structure, steel plated, 16-sided. So if there is in a case of a 3-legged or a 4-legged tower structure, if one of those legs fail, the whole tower does come down. And it could be a manufacturing defect, it could be an installation defect, it could be a number of things. So this takes out that uncertainty out of the picture, that it is one plate structure that's fully welded and designed as one piece.
So this is the same as the tower that's right off of Sunrise between here and Hampton Bays, where the trucking, the town utility, county utility pole is? That's a single cell tower
Then
pole.
it's probably this. So I guess the the photo reports that you see will probably show what it's gonna look like. And that's,
Physically, if I wanted to actually see one, that would be a better representation. There's no guide wires, it's just one
correct.
multi-sided pole that,
That's what it's gonna look like, exactly like that. So it tapers a little bit, but it's solid steel, plated, welded structure.
The AT&T has had its antennas on Cablevision's tower since what, 1986?
I'm not
At least to the
sure.
early 90s, as far as back as we can see.
I think it was in the 80s.
Yeah, it
I'm
could.
pretty sure it was.
Could well be, yes. But they've been providing that service for that long.
And that's a nice thank you for being a well-paying tenant for 30 years. Get off. We're not going to sell it to you. We're not going to renew your lease. And thumbing your nose at the residents of the town that rely every day on that tower, invisibly or not. And I'm going to say it again. The Dolans are being belligerent with removing these towers for their own, I don't know if they're doing it for the sake of being mean or, which is usually what they do. They're not nice people. And I just think that what they're doing is wrong. And if it does tie in with this freewheeling service that they've been advertising on their channels, I think that's even worse. If they're trying to eliminate their potential competition by removing these structures, it's just wrong in so many ways. And with all the futility that the residents have experienced with those people running that company, it's just a shame. There's no reason for you to be here tonight, is what I'm saying. Cablevision is doing this to the village out of their own belligerence. I just want everybody to know that. I'm not going to make it as a statement of fact, but that's what it appears. That's what they did in Sag Harbor, and I have no reason to believe they're not going to dismantle this tower. In fact, I think they've made it somewhat known, not officially, but everybody in the industry is pretty well aware that these towers are slated to be raised. I don't have anything else.
I guess I'll ask Donna Marie to come up and she can show you the photographic simulations
Thank you.
of what the proposed facility would look like. In the simulations, you'll see that the existing tower remains. We are operating on the assumption that it's going to stay, but obviously if that were to leave, the skyline would change somewhat.
I understand that you've already seen the simulations, they were already submitted, correct?
photographs?
Yeah, the photographs, yeah, perfect. I did bring a board, just in case we needed to look at them again, and/or if anyone from the public wanted to see them. They're laid out. Donna Marie Stippo for the record, DMS Consulting, and my office is in Mahwah, New Jersey. The visual analysis was done in March in what's called a leaf-off condition, which is your worst-case scenario with respect to visual changes or taking a look at what your visibility would be. So it was the perfect time in which to do the analysis. Further, we took further steps to have a crane come on the property, raise the boom to 165 feet, and then have it tilt over the location where the tower would be, so that we would have what's called a control point. So as you drive around, or as anyone drove around, if you took a picture, you would see exactly where the tower is going to be and what the height would be. that allowed my team to render the tower into the photographs, so you get a real time. You get a before, and then you get an after. So the photograph is taken, and you then see the simulated viewpoint with the tower that would be proposed, exactly as the view shed is existing. And it was done in March of this year. When you have a control point, you have a ready site, so it really allows you to fit into the view shed with respect to height and what else is there. 7 views were presented in a before and after, and then what council has just handed in was an analysis as to how this was all done, which is I'm explaining now, in addition to 9 other photographs of what's going on in the community and what's already existing, other towers, other infrastructure. I don't know if you have any questions on the photographs that you had seen previously. I can answer questions, or I can just go through them. The analysis would also take into consideration what's called sensitive receptors under New York State DEC policy, and something that would reflect back into the seeker analysis, as well as your NEPA analysis on a federal structure. Within the area, you have a historic district down on Main Street that took into account visibility from Main Street, and that would be in your view 1. So it shows you what's currently existing. Within this area, you have what's an existing blue monopole structure, as well as you're currently also looking at the lattice tower that may or not be existing, but nonetheless it's part of the view shed. And then if you look at the proposed, you'll see the tower within the view shed and where it would be located in the photograph. It would be over to your right-hand side. We further took a look at what would be visible from David White's Lane as it goes north. And you have visibility along that area, essentially from Pulaski Street straight north up to North C. Metcalf Road. From that area, we took a look at the vistas that you would look at. So the analysis incorporated a 1-mile radii, which brought into the town of Southampton's vistas, as well as the village, with concentration in a 1/2-mile radii. 5 and 6, you can take a look at those. It'll show you the photosims from where you would be seen. Again, for 7 Ponds Lane, on view 6, it shows you the vista. It's already incorporating the other towers. Again, it looks small in the background, but you can see it on the horizon. You have a tower here, existing tower, and then the proposed. We also took a look at residential uses. Interestingly enough, the tower set back into the property into the northwest corner. Residential uses to the south, essentially the towers visible along the eastern section of the residential streets, Pulaski Street and I think it's Pellerose Street. That area is also taking a look at the existing lattice tower that's currently in the view shed. We're set back and a lot lower, a lot smaller, but it had some visibility, and you can see visibility from
Pelletreau Street.
Pelletreau Street, yes, and that would be your view number 2. It sits straight in the back. As you go west on these local streets, our tower is not necessarily visible, but the blue monopole comes into play. And in the back of the report that we've just handed in, you'll see additional photographs showing that residents from that area also have a tower that's existing in their view shed.
So you can't see it from that view? You can't
Correct.
see your pole from that view?
Correct.
But you can see the other one that's already there?
Correct. So, and additionally, if you take a look at out of the 9 additional photos that we had put forth, there's a lattice tower at a residence directly to the south on David White's Lane. That lattice tower is clear, visible, and sits within the residential area. And I provided that photograph for you also. We also took a look at your main thoroughfare, which would be County Road 39, going into New York State 27, and your visibility there is essentially limited, believe it or not. It, let's see, on my map over here. As you're coming into town, both local and travelers, it essentially begins at the intersection where we have North Main, as you travel straight through to David White's Lane, that's pretty much your level of visibility. It's consistent with what's currently in the view shed, both the existing lattice tower and the blue monopole, and our pole is set back in. You'll take a look at view 7 and view 3, and that'll show you the infrastructure, your utility infrastructure, the wires and everything that is already part of the view shed, along with your utility poles, and the tower sits in the back. Would be on your, right under the lights over here, in case you can't see it. What was interesting is that as you go into some of the vistas, there's utility right-of-way that's running. These are large lattice towers. They're also part of what's currently in the vista and within the view shed. Although our structure was not necessarily visible from those areas, existing towers were. So that's also part of the report. In sum, what the analysis did show is that although a new structure would be introduced into the community, where it's located and the height that it's at is consistent with what's currently in that view shed. You have additional towers, you have the blue monopole, and the lattice tower that's there, as well as utility infrastructure. It doesn't necessarily add anything that's not visually consistent, so you have consistence with the view shed. The location of the structure within the property does not restrict or hamper any of the existing uses. They'll stay the same. It's passive in its use. There would not be any noise or any fumes or any vibrations created by it. With respect to where it's sitting on the property, ingress and egress already exist, so that wouldn't change, nor would it hamper it. It's set back by the railroad right away. It doesn't require any services from the village and or the town, and wouldn't change any of the traffic patterns that currently exist. It's unmanned, so there wouldn't be anybody there unless there was something that the tower needed service for. In general, the analysis showed that although a new structure would be coming into play from within the area, from in the half-mile and 1 mile radii I looked at, we would undergo a minimal alteration along the view shed and very consistent with what's currently there. I don't know if you have any questions for me or...
One other question that I had from before that maybe you might be able to answer. How many sites did you survey before you settled on this site?
This specific site, I think there were 10 that were looked at by Capital Telecom before selecting this one. As you gentlemen know, the industrial area in the village is very limited. There's a very small number of properties. This is one of the larger ones. Most of the property owners who were contacted were not interested, if not outright non-responsive to the project. So that is how we arrived at this one.
They're all in the same area?
Yes, sir. Yes, because they need to be close to where the existing Cablevision tower is, so that they can replicate the service.
The power company, they have property, nobody on Mariner Drive would sign on board or in that industrial area, so
yes,
you were limited to those that would
yes, sir.
Were agreeable.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Oh, it is right behind the
In
garage.
fact, we even contacted.
Yeah, it's right behind the garage for the garage.
Even the MTA was contacted about that blue pole, but they won't lease to anyone there for whatever reason. I would just note that the simulations do reflect the 3 carriers, even though
I
Sprint
noticed
Verizon.
that,
I just
yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
clarify that that's what I mentioned earlier, so that was clear to you what the future co-locators would look
Right.
like.
I mean, it's set back into the property, it's in that northwest corner, it's right along the railroad. Additional fencing will be put in. Mariner will look at it, but I mean, they're also right along the right-of-way of the railroad.
I'm sure the other carriers will be there. I can't imagine where else they would go.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say that it is highly likely you'll see them very quickly.
They've actually submitted, and the board should have letters of intent from the carriers stating their intention to come on when they need to leave the Cablevision tower.
Do you have anything else right now?
I have a couple of other individuals. I'll keep them very brief. First will be Mike Lynch. He's our real estate expert. His report we just handed up to you. You haven't seen it yet, but he can speak a little bit about his analysis of the real estate values in the area.
Swear in or no? No, okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Only
members
the
of-
town does that. We trust people here in the village.
Thank you. My name is Michael Lynch. I'm state certified real estate appraiser with offices at 15 Dewey Street in Huntington. I inspected this property back on August 6th. I walked the property, I walked the neighborhood, I took a series of photos, and I prepared a report that Mr. Coughlin handed up. The property, I'll be brief again, I don't want to rehash as to what's already been said. It's a proposed 165-foot monopole, and AT&T proposes 12 antennas at the top of the tower. There'll be a equipment compound just to the east of it. It will be sited at the northwest corner of the light industrial property, which is a 2.6 acre parcel situated within the LI zone. It's on the north side of Powell Avenue, approximately 200 feet to the west of David White's Avenue. David White's land, excuse me. The immediate area, as Ms. Stippo pointed out, is primarily industrial north of Powell Avenue, north to State Route 27. To the south are residences. Again, this property is 2.6 acres. It's a light industrial zone property. The site itself will be immediately adjacent to the Long Island Railroad right-of-way. There's existing 3 warehouse-type properties on the site. Immediately to the east is a Verizon switching industrial-type property. To the west is a similar industrial warehouse-type property. To the north, of course, is the railroad, and then to the north of that is Mariners Lane, and there's additional industrial-type properties. The nearest residences are to the south on Powell Avenue, approximately 400 feet away. Again, the proposal is to relocate this communications facility from the Cablevision Tower, which is approximately 300 yards away to the northeast on David White's Lane. And the site itself will be designed for co-location, as Mr. Coughlin pointed out. I've been working on communications facilities over the past 25 years, studies across Suffolk and Nassau counties, including the East End of Long Island, sites in town of Southampton, town of East Hampton, village of East Hampton, village of West Hampton Beach, town of Shelter Island, etc. I have studies outlined in my report of similar type studies. Again, given the zoning of this site, the existing conditions in the area, including the other communications towers in the immediate areas, Ms. Stippo pointed out, based on the design of this and again the existing conditions and properties in the immediate area, I don't feel this site, should it be approved, will result in any devaluation of surrounding property values. And I can answer any questions if the board may have any at this point. Okay? Thank you for your time. I have a copy of my CV, by the way, at the in the appendix of my report.
I was going to have Neil Arcio come up next. He's the gentleman who generated the propagation maps. I note that the board has been looking at these. He's really here just to explain what we've already talked about. He has the larger size boards in case anyone's here. But I guess if you could do it briefly.
Okay.
Thank you, Neil.
Okay, my name is Neil Arce. I'm a principal RF engineer from Premera, providing RF consulting services for AT&T. I prepared the plots that were submitted to the boards today. Okay, so this is a vicinity map for Southampton. Right now we have AT&T has 2 on-air sites serving the village of Southampton. One is the one co-located at the Cablevision Tower, and the other one at the Southampton Hospital. There are 3 neighboring sites. We have here at the FM station in Stony Brook. We have one here, that's a monopole, and we have another site here, that's also a monopole, and over here. So currently the Cablevision site is providing.
Why did you say Stony Brook?
Oh, that's a neighboring site. So they're first-tier neighbors to provide continuous service in the area. So we have sites connecting
But that's not Stony Brook.
over here.
It's the Stony Brook Satellite Campus, this, the
the
Tuckahoe,
satellite
the
campus.
Tuckahoe Lane site.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
not Stony Brook.
Soon.
Okay. So here, the existing Cablevision site is providing approximately 4,250 acres of non-overlapping coverage for in-car and in-building service. The green one represents in-building service. The yellow one represents in-car. The blue one represents outdoor service. And the white one, that's no service. Okay, the next slide is just the same as the first slide, but it just shows the clutter. You have the residential area and highways. Now, by removing the Cablevision site, we will lose a huge area here, especially on the the important State Highway 27. That's about 4-mile stretch from McGee Street up to the Mill Pond area. So that stretch, you have some business establishments there. And if we take it off, then we lose coverage there. That's a huge area. And the proposed site, which is about 0.17 mile away, south from the existing Cablevision tower. On page 6. Yeah, it's providing about 4,013 acres of non-overlapping coverage, which is roughly 94% of the original coverage provided by the Cablevision tower. And the next slide is just, again, just to show what's underneath the plot. And the last slide is showing a summary of comparing the existing Cablevision and the proposed site. So if the board has any question.
Very thorough.
So basically, you're gonna lose about 6%.
Yeah, we're gonna lose slightly about 5 to 6%. That's because the site shifted to the south. And it increased the overlapping coverage to the Southampton Hospital site. So, but the important thing here is that the loss of coverage is just huge. Like, it's almost 4-mile stretch on State Highway 27. Yeah, it's a huge loss. This is roughly 4-mile stretch. And State Highway 27 connects, the East Hamptons, to New York.
So what in blue is what
Yeah.
you lose?
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's only outdoor coverage. I'm talking about in-car coverage we're gonna lose, as well as in-building coverage. And that will also affect other services like data services, internet, mobile internet, and
Thank you, Neil.
sure.
I have one other individual who I think will also have a pretty short presentation. I would just note for the benefit of the board, I think you have seen this before, but under the Telecommunications Act, folks can't challenge these sorts of applications so long as the emission standards have been analyzed and shown to comply with the FCC standards. Mr. Collins is that FCC compliance expert. He's done the study. You have it. I have him here if you want him to put that on the verbal record. So if you want to come up.
We have it in the written report?
You have it in a written
We
report.
don't take verbatim minutes of our hearings,
Okay.
so the written report is more than sufficient if you're just trying to cover the record.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. That is everyone who I had intended to come up to address their various areas of expertise. Obviously, they're still here. I'm here. If you have any additional questions that you would like us to address this evening, or if any members of the community would like to
Any
ask
other
questions.
questions, Jerry? You seem to be an expert on this thing.
Well,
Well, you are. I know you've had some experience with it.
I just have one bookkeeping thing for us. As I mentioned to you at the work session, the village's planning and environmental consultant has, Nelson Pope Voorhees, has recommended that there is a need for an additional consultant to assist in their review of this application. And so under the, pursuant to the recently amended village code provision, we need to adopt the following resolution. So let me read it to you out loud. Candace, I'll give you a copy. Okay. Whereas the village's planning and environmental consultant has recommended that there is a need for an additional consultant to assist in the review of the application of Capital Telecom Acquisition LLC and New Singular Wireless PCS LLC due to the particular nature of such application. Resolved that the Zoning Board of Appeals concurs with such recommendation and hereby notifies the applicants of such need and the applicant's responsibility for payment of an additional review fee for such review in accordance with Section 116-21I of the Zoning Code as amended on August 13, 2015.
So I move that we accept that as stated.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, would you pass that down to Candice so she can get it?
I can do it.
Would you like a copy of the resolution? And there's a copy of the code amendment.
Okay,
I believe the planning board will be doing the same thing.
very good.
Okay. Just one other thing, not by way of a question. We'll need to coordinate with the planning board in connection with the review of this application. Kathy Eisenman from Chick's office has done quite a bit of work so far in terms of review and getting information needed for secret, et cetera. So I think we would probably, did you talk to Kathy about this?
I did. The planning board is still reviewing the application.
Right.
It has not been determined to be complete yet. When it is, they intend to do a coordinated review. They do have an environmental assessment form.
Right. So
So that will be
they're willing to be the
forthcoming.
lead agency.
They are willing to be the lead
Okay, then
agency.
why don't we indicate for the record that we're willing to have the planning board be the lead agency for secret review. It's just us and them, so we don't need to do a formal thing.
Correct.
Okay, so we'll indicate that for the record, and Chick will pass on to Kathy that the planning board will do the complete the secret review.
Okay.
Do you need a motion for that?
No. So the planning board will follow up with secret review. Again, Kathy Eisenman from Nelson Pope and Voorhees will be coordinating with an additional consultant to get the additional assistance that she needs, and then we'll see where this goes. So I think they've made a very thorough presentation tonight and covered the bases of the standards under the code. We need to hear if there's any comments from the public, and then we'll need to coordinate with the planning board.
Are there any comments from the public? Please come up.
Hi, board.
My name is Janine Price. I own a house directly across the street on Powell Avenue, 144 Powell Avenue, for over 10 years. I work in Southampton for the last 8 years. I believe that they misled or represented the fact that we were notified. I received my letter last week. I just received it, so this is new to me. Powell Avenue, there's always that hope that that property across the street from me, all the trucks coming in and out, that one day the ugly duck will turn into something beautiful. I do have children under the age of 11. And I know there are other towers, and we need to find out what Cablevision is doing. But I don't want one directly across the street from me, because it does affect, I know that they had an analyst come in from Huntington. I would like them to consider having local realtors from the village to tell me that it's not going to affect my property value. So my house is, the letters that went out, the only thing I know, because I'm not very familiar, is I asked how many letters went out. And apparently it's within a 200 feet radius, is what I was told. This tower is 165 feet high, so I believe that a lot of the residents, this will just go right under, they're not even aware that this is going on. And I just found out, so I haven't really been able to talk to a lot of the people in the village. So I'm asking that they consider another location, and that location does affect me. I'm a resident, and that whole street has residential houses on that property. And people have been working really hard. A lot of those houses have been redone. It's looking nice, that road. So please consider that. And the other thing is, if they do this, how long is that contract? So now that's going to lock that property up for the next, I don't know how many years. So all this is a big concern to me.
Usually 20.
20. So I don't know how any of you would feel having that directly across the street from you, but that will be directly across the street from my property. So just consider that the only notice I received was last week in the mail, and I just received it. Thank you.
Notice, yeah. So you have been notified, huh?
I was just notified. They said that nobody objected. I was just notified.
I didn't say that nobody objected.
I didn't hear them say that.
Well, actually, when you spoke, you said none of the residents came forward, that none of the residents had said anything.
I was saying that I was stepping away so that residents could come
Oh,
forward.
okay, I thought you meant in general, okay. All right. Thank you.
Good evening, Good evening, board members. My name is Ted Gossman, and I too live across the street, directly across the street from the proposed site at 153 Powell. I reside at 166 Powell Avenue. Well, I concur with the board for the need for such facilities for emergency services and the like. I have many questions and concerns about this proposal, about this application, as I believe you also should have questions and concerns. As such, at this moment, I posed this initial application until these matters are addressed. And I believe that there are considerable items that need to really be focused on, as my neighbor had mentioned. And I ask that you, as board members, address these issues and ask these questions on our behalf from the applicant. And also, I just want to let you know that I too was only notified about this application last week by certified mail. I was told by the applicant that they had a few workshops over the course of the last several months with the planning board. We were never invited to those workshops. So I don't know who was there, I don't know who was invited, but we live, actually our homes are about two houses away from each other.
The public hearing
No,
process
I understand.
is just beginning. Tonight is the initial hearing. It won't be over tonight.
No, I understand that, but
You need more time to look at the documents that they filed or to
well,
present
that's
comments?
exactly what I'm just asking is
You
that
will have that time.
you have the power to ask these questions also of the applicant, and what I'm doing is I would like to just raise them to you. First, I believe that there is a better location for this tower. The Cablevision tower presently is on the other side of the railroad tracks, which is heavily commercial and industrial, and it doesn't abut to a major residential area, which is Powell, Pelletreau, Pulaski, David White's Lane. I believe that some locations over there. I drove around. There are many locations off of Mariners Way, off of 27, that would be much more suitable for the location than directly across the street from a major, and as my neighbor had mentioned, improving neighborhood, which I believe everybody in the village is appreciative of. I think also that there's, I don't know if you took a look at the design, but I think the design is like a first generation design of a monopole. I've seen many new designs that are much more attractive, whether they're Christmas tree-like or whatever the case is. But I think that that should be brought up as
The
well.
antennas can be internal.
Correct. I think there's something that can be
I
done.
don't think they're as efficient that way, but
They can, I've seen some, you see them on the throughways, you see them in certain areas. I think it's something that this village would definitely want to conceal that, if there's any possibility of doing that. And, I haven't heard that addressed at all. And just by the way, I'm an AT&T customer for the record, so I want a tower, but I just don't think that this is the right location, and I don't think it's the right design. I also am a real estate professional and attorney, and I'm happy that the applicant has made the effort to get a real estate appraiser to let me know that my property value will not be diminished with a 165-foot tower 300 feet from my house. But we all know that that's not the case. I've shown homes, I've shown thousands of homes. If there's even a telephone pole in front of the house, the buyers balk at that, and it always raises concern. So 165-foot monopole with cellular capability that and possibility that it could fall. I'm not saying that it will, but that it could fall. It could strike my property. It's that close. I also ask you to look at the simulation more closely for those visitors arriving by train at the Southampton train station. The simulation clearly shows the Cablevision trellis tower in the background. So basically, when you come off the train, I walked it and I looked at it. If you come off the train, the trellis is in the background behind the train station. This monopole is directly in line of sight from when you get off that train and you come down, everybody's parking right there. So it's literally right there. So it will be an eyesore as far as what I can see there. It changes the landscape for those visiting, and it will be clearly, absolutely visible. And I guess my home's about 300 feet away. They had mentioned the nearest home is 400 feet away, but my home is 300 feet away. The proposed tower is 165 feet. Has anybody questioned the need for 165 feet? Do we really need that height? Can it be done with 100 feet or 90 feet? These are questions that I think need to be raised, need to be answered, and I leave you with one question. It's basically like my neighbor had said, think about whether you would want that monster in your back or front yard. And I thank you.
Anybody else who wishes to be heard?
Good evening. I'm Eric Winkler. I live in a neighborhood on John Street. I, too, have some reservations about this tower. And I'm an IT professional for 30 years, and I'm sympathetic to the cause. But I'm also a bit concerned, particularly what you, Mr. Ferrara, said. I feel we have a little bit of a gun pointed to our head here. We're trading one eyesore, we're adding another eyesore to an existing eyesore. And I think, we all want these services, but we shouldn't rush to really judge something. I mean, it is, first of all, it's not compliant with the zoning law. So we should be very careful of approving something that is not compliant with the zoning law. And I'm sure we will do that. And since AT&T is the first one to take the step and ask for this tower, and we speculate that the others will have to come into this facility as well. I think we have some time to do this. I'm really concerned that we kind of almost felt we're hostage here to a whole situation. You mentioned the tower in Noyak was taken down by Cablevision and others. So I think we really should take time and the opportunity to look for a more creative solution and perhaps a more comprehensive solution for the region. Whether that is through newer technology, whether it is through a different location, maybe a more, redoubling the effort to renegotiate with the current, provider of the service. I think we could all benefit from this. And maybe it would be great if the existing tower would come down and we had a smaller tower. But now we have 2 towers. We don't know. I think whether it's this planning board or in, cooperation with the town, since the other tower is on the other side of the tracks and part of the town, I think we should take the time and the opportunity to bring these people together and really find a solution that benefits everybody. And I think AT&T, who's taking the leadership, can participate in that. Hopefully the village and the town will do that, because it shouldn't be, it's a benefit to us individually, but it's also community service, whether it's television, whether it's radio, whether it's emergency services that are provided through these communication towers. I think it's important that we solve this problem not just once, for one at a time, but perhaps at least for a more broader regional, service that benefits everybody, and so that we don't have the same discussion in each village. And it may be better to have, smaller towers in multiple locations. I don't know, but I think we should take the time to find out and find a better solution. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Therefore, we're going to hold this open for all purposes, correct?
Yes.
I move we hold this open for all purposes.
You got a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This file is going to be big.
I know.
Bigger, bigger.
1 minute back for break.
Okay. We'll hold it to a minute.
It's on the clock.
I'll clear out the room. On the application of case number 2887, 259 South Main Street, a revocable trust, 259 South Main Street.
Good evening.
Good evening, John.
Affidavits. It's not 25 and 10. I'll try to get through this quickly. Also, let me hand up a copy of Arthur Frazier's building plans, because they may help you understand what's going on here. There's a lot of dimensions and requests for relief, but they're it's one of those situations where you have a lot of small matters, I think, adding up to what looks like a big deal, but isn't necessarily, I hope anyway. These are Arthur's building plans.
Want to try to set the check?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John.
We should have with me this evening, Bailey Larkin from my office. I'm Michelle Madonna from Tim Rump's office, Area Design. So you should have the planting plan, because we're gonna do some wetlands restoration. You should have the planting plan in the file. But I thought I'd hand this up because it might help you understand some of the things here going on here. By the way, I don't know, I've just recently involved in this, come before you. I'm not exactly sure procedurally how this happened, but this house actually has approval from the Architectural Review Board, proposed house, I should say. It obtained it in the early part of this year, so I have a copy of that. I don't know, Rick, I don't know procedurally how that occurred, but it seems to have occurred. Again, that was before my involvement in the matter. There is ARB approval for this. I mean, not that binds you, but it's...
It definitely does not.
No, I know. That's why I said not that it does. That's what I said. But it's some indication. I was interesting. I was surprised as a fairly recent Court of Appeals case in which one of the reasons they upheld the denial of a variance was because they found that the house was not aesthetically conforming to the area. So I guess to a certain degree, to the extent that we're dealing with variances here, I guess the converse of that wasn't true. But, no, it doesn't bind you, of course. You could probably divide this application into two applications. One is a request to allow us to maintain this garage, which has been constructed. It was constructed pursuant to a building permit, and specifically, let's see, I lost my, well, that's really bad, I lost my security blanket, my notes. Hold on.
Are these the same as what you just handed us up, John, what we just got from?
Yes.
The same?
Yeah, they are. I put an extra couple copies in the
Oh,
file
okay.
because if Rob...
You have a copy of this, right?
The plans?
Yeah.
Yes.
In any event, getting back to the matter, there's a garage in the front yard of this property. Again, prior to my involvement, but the question is, of course, how did this garage get here? Because it's truly in the front yard of the property. There was a building permit issued in 2014, building permit number 11337, for the construction of this garage. I think what happened was the building inspector was under the impression that this is a flag lot. When I first looked at it, I said, well, maybe it is a flag lot, but I looked at the definition and it isn't. It is not a flag lot because it may sort of look like a flag lot at first, but it's not. It doesn't meet the definition of a flag lot because although the applicant owns this portion in fee, and he owns the building area in fee, access to the lot is interrupted, fee access, I should say. Ownership, full fee ownership access is interrupted by this piece, which is access only by easement. So it doesn't meet the definition of a flag lot. But I think because a flag lot, you have to have fee ownership all the way from South Main Street. You'd have to have fee ownership all the way from South Main Street to the buildable area, and that is interrupted.
So that piece is owned by the other property?
This piece is owned by the other property.
The property down below?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what, this is the Halsey house right here.
Yes, yeah.
I think it's probably understandable that the building inspector thought that this was a flag lot, but it's not. And that's why the building permit was issued for the garage, which is now built. It's under construction.
Oh, it's a very nice garage.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's
very
nice. And to the
Looks
extent,
a lot like the house.
looks like that. I guess to the extent that one of the things I've always thought that the reason you don't want the village wisely says you can't have accessory structures in the front yard is, you know, you're driving down the street, you don't want to see any kind of structures. You want to see the house first. This is quite a ways from the actual, from South Main Street, so I think that helps it from the point of view. Also, a good faith reliance on a building permit is in and of itself a grounds for a variance. I don't have any dollars and cents proof for you. I would just rely, unless you want, I can get that for you. I just thought it was
You mean to tear it down?
I thought it was fairly obvious that it would be an economic detriment to have to tear it down, and it wouldn't be the loss of the value of.
I think you can focus on the other parts of your application.
Okay, all right. I didn't want to be presumptuous about that.
I mean, this property was before us several months ago.
Yep.
And they were trying to make Lake Agawam the front lot line
That doesn't work.
by way of variance, I think, something like that.
Yeah,
And it was gonna change the whole zoning around, and we, I guess I made some discouraging comments to that approach.
I think they withdrew it, didn't they?
But it would have made the garage okay.
Yeah, but talk about,
Right,
you
but,
know,
no.
I mean,
Okay, so,
it doesn't.
I don't think
doesn't
we
work.
have a problem with the garage. It might not necessarily be the case with other things, so,
Oh, okay, we'll see what happens.
so
Okay.
focus on the other things.
All right.
And before I forget, we have no 50% clause data that I'm aware of.
Okay, we'll get you that.
That was presented, so we'll need that data eventually.
Just eyeballing it, I didn't see that that was an issue, but you're right, it should be in the record, there's no question about that, so, in any event. What we have here is a situation where the house was built, was constructed prior to any village wetlands regulations. It doesn't fit and comply with the village wetlands regulations. The septic system for the house is probably within the 150-foot setback. Well, or close. That's the northeastern portion of the survey. Moving the septic system back, which is outside of the village. We know that we're proposing some improvements that will need variance relief because of the property line, where this being the rear yard, and it also needs some wetlands help. But so, in order to do that, you can't come in empty-handed. We're offering to mitigate some of the concerns that one would generally have for property that fronts on Lake Agawam or in wetlands. So we're proposing to redevelop the wastewater system to a conforming wastewater system, which would be at its closest 209 feet from the wetlands, which is more than conforming. I think that's a huge benefit. I was reading with the sewer district proposal. One of the things that they're concerned about is the impact of sewage systems, septic systems on Lake Agawam. I happen to think probably it's more of a runoff issue, but nevertheless, that certainly getting these systems out further away from Lake Agawam will hopefully will be helpful. Also, there's really no buffer to speak of. The lawn pretty much goes right down to the wetlands line, so Ares Design has provided a proposed revegetation with some native planting. I'm sure Chick will have some comments on that, as I would hope he would, any way that we can help satisfy or meet any concerns that the board would have with comment on that wetlands plan. Michelle is here tonight, and we welcome any ways to help to further that along. These are relatively, I would say, small additions. We're removing, there's a part of the residence that's supposed to be removed. There's a two-story portion of the residence. And it gets a little busy here, but I thought probably the best way to see what was going to be removed was if you look at the proposed south elevation, which is drawing number 5. You look at the existing south elevation. and the proposed elevation. You can see where Arthur has drawn this, to remove this two-story piece. And it's shown on the survey as part to be removed. And what that will be replaced with, and it's probably best seen on the areas drawing, what that area will be replaced with will be a covered porch. You can see it on the area's design. There's a covered porch there, which again is not an increase in the capacity of the house to house folks. Fairly a benign increase. We'll need a little bit of wetlands relief there. And then there's a proposed addition to the north of that, which again is a fairly modest addition. And then finally an addition to the north of that, which is a garage with living space above it. The bedroom count is about 8, so we're trying to provide to keep those cars required.
There'd be 3 in the existing garage,
Three in the
and this would be 2 more.
2 more, yeah, which is not unusual for a house in this area. So, and in order to do that, we would require not only variance relief, because Lake Agawam forms the boundary line, the property line setback, but wetlands relief. Edging a bit closer with that northerly addition, that northwest addition to the wetlands, thus the proposed buffer to try to mitigate.
It's in the corner there?
67.9 feet where that portion of the house is now, well, I guess the closest portion of the northwesterly portion of the house is 88.5. So we're getting a little bit closer there, thus the proposed
On
buffer.
the plans, they show like a 45 cut off the back of and it says 80 feet.
Where is that?
On the floor plan.
What drawing is it?
That one right there, you see the corner of the garage?
Mm-hmm.
Drawing number
1. 80 feet to setback. Maybe he means the property line setback as opposed to the wetland setback. Because that would make sense if you look at it.
Yeah, maybe, it's just
Yeah.
not clear,
It's not
and then
clear.
it doesn't show it on the survey as being, that little 45 on the,
Let me get it. Let me. I hate ambiguities like that. So we'll get that cleared up. Is this to wetlands or to wetlands or property line, and show on survey? Okay. So
it might adjust all those numbers, that's,
yeah. Okay. It may very well. I think I gave you copies of the A or B decision. We had a letter of email of support from Charles Stevenson. He's within the boundary of who we have to notify, but he is one lot further to the south. But in any event, that's the only neighborhood support letter we had. I did meet with another neighbor and gave him a copy of the application. I have not heard from him one way or the other. Maybe he's here tonight, I don't know. There we are. It's 10 of 10. I didn't think that this would be closed, this meeting. I thought probably Chick would have some questions, you guys would have some questions, Ricks would have some questions, so I thought maybe I would ask if there are any questions that you have that we could respond to, or any comments.
I'm sure we'll have some from Chick, maybe some from Rick. Jerry down here?
No.
Dan?
no, I'm good.
Rick?
I don't know if you care or not, but there are portions of the existing house that are located further from the rear lot line and further from the wetlands than what you're proposing to do, and I haven't heard you address why you're proposing something. Obviously, you could enlarge this house probably without a rear yard variance
Yeah.
and without wetlands relief.
I think it has to do with the interior flow of the house, number one, and number two. And
It wouldn't surprise me if it did, but you haven't,
okay, we'll get. I'll have.
haven't given us any reasons to even think about granting any relief.
Well, Rick,
Other than, and you're asking for a variance for the garage that was recently built, which we've already indicated is not a problem.
Right.
Now you're proposing another garage in a location which comes closer to the wetlands and closer to the rear lot line than anything else.
Well, I know, but I think, given the fact that you have essentially lawn all the way down to the to Lake Agawam, and we're proposing to revegetate, that's the sort of thing that could be an appropriate quid pro quo. I've certainly seen the board do it in the past, but we'll try to address those concerns. You know, one of the things that's happening here is that there's an existing residence. The existing residence doesn't conform. This is not. These are very small additions. It's a rather light touch to this existing property.
We don't have any data on the size of the
Sure, we'll
additions.
get that for you. Okay.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. We basically have no information, you know, from what we looked at in our packet from the work session, before anything you've handed in tonight, we had no information really in which to analyze the application.
Fair enough. We'll get you that in.
So
I know what you need.
some of it may be in what you've handed up tonight, but we haven't looked at it yet.
Okay, very good. Fair enough.
Chick, is there anything?
I had comments similar to Rick's. Yeah, I think we would benefit from an understanding of the quantities of encroachment, not only from a setback standpoint, but from an area standpoint, and how that would be offset by a buffer. I mean, the property does slope, not heavily, but there is a slope toward Lake Agawam. The Lake Agawam plan did speak to buffers, even in the 50-foot range where possible. Obviously, this lot has some logistical issues with the existing house location, but there are many areas where additional buffer could be provided. And, you know, I was more concerned about the garage area than anything else. It seemed as though going over the existing deck and removing part of a residence, you know, to the south side is not terribly aggressive. The middle portion has setbacks that are similar, at least, to the minimal setbacks that exist, but the corner of the garage is fairly substantial in my mind. I think the petition calls it minimal, but you know, to be 68 or so feet from the wetlands when 150 is required.
Yeah, why don't we take a look at that?
It's pretty minimal.
Let me see if we can, Chick, maybe we can, let me talk to the architect. Maybe we can migrate some of that.
A check on that, there was a 25-foot setback from the property line. Is that the minimum setback?
Yeah.
I believe it is.
For 40.
But if you gave a little bit of relief from that, you could slide that garage forward. And again, would that be a better benefit?
Well, how big is this, what's the size?
You know, I certainly generally can accept something that's no closer than an existing non-conforming structure, or minimally. So if the board felt that that was an appropriate trade-off, you know, depending on the neighbor to the north and so forth, if it increases the wetland setback, I see that as a benefit.
Why don't we take a look at that?
And then just if you could also indicate the setback of the existing sanitary system so that that can be compared. You know, I think that you certainly emphasize the conformance of the new sanitary system, but to have those setback numbers would be useful. And I don't disagree with that as being a benefit. It's just that this board kind of has to weigh the trade-offs and also the precedent of a structure that close where it currently doesn't conform.
Looks like about 140, but we'll have the survey.
Just so you're aware, John, because I know you weren't involved when this property came before us.
No, I wasn't.
Some months ago, and then it was withdrawn, but some of the things that we're saying tonight
were said before.
Were indicated to the architect, and then we get an application that doesn't.
Well, maybe I'll help the architect.
That doesn't address any of those comments. It's like they were ignored.
Okay, yeah, then that's annoying. I understand.
Yes.
That, yeah. Okay. All right. This is very helpful. Okay. Great. Can I go home now?
Is there anyone in the audience wishes to be heard to this application? No. Therefore, we're going to hold this open for all purposes.
Thanks.
I move we hold this open for all purposes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Have a nice night, guys.
I gotta follow John out the door.
You get home too, Chick.
Shall we follow them out too? There's somebody
Sorry,
else
Linda.
here.
I don't know how happy Linda would be about that.
Sorry, Linda. No wetlands on yours, right? Okay.
Could you throw a wetlands
We have to stay? Put a pond in there somewhere.
There must be some somewhere.
There's a red maple somewhere.
It's got it.
Deserting us again.
Well, it's been a long night. I'm sure Linda will be brief.
Let's take a close look at that survey. I think right there, I see a little tiny strip of wetlands.
Better check that out. Have a good night.
Good night, Chick. Night, Chick. On the application of case number 2888, Marjorie Colessa, hope I pronounced that right, 34 Willow Street.
Good evening. Linda Riley, 235 Hampton Road for Marjorie Colessa. I've just handed up the affidavits of posting and mailing. I submitted a pretty thorough application, but I do want to reiterate a few things, and I have a few extra handouts. This is essentially a very tiny two-bedroom cottage. It has only 833 square feet in the entire house. It's now 1.5 stories high. The CO is for 1.5 stories. I understand that the attic which has two full-size windows on either side of the gable. Although from the sides it appears to be a habitable space up there, it's not. There's 700 square feet of non-habitable square feet on the attic, which is too short to be considered part of gross floor area. This is owned, this property, by Marjorie Colessa. It's been in her family for generations. She's widowed now and expects to retire soon and expects to retire to this house. She recently experienced some extensive water damage that knocked out the whole heating system and decided to seize this opportunity to make the house more up-to-date, more in keeping with the surrounding neighborhood, and more suitable as her primary principal residence. So she's proposing to convert the existing 1.5-story house by raising up the roof, essentially, and adding a full second story, which will only be 658 square feet on the second floor of habitable gross floor area. And that will be completely over, actually only a portion of the existing first floor. In addition to that, she has a minor 88 square foot addition that she wants to put in the first floor that will essentially square out a sort of nook that's carved out of the house. That area, that 88 square foot area where she's adding a little bit on the first floor, will not have any second story over it. The primary hardship that she's facing here is that she's on a corner lot. She's on a corner lot, Willis Street and Warren Street, with 2 front yard setbacks. Each of the setbacks on the front yards is 30 feet for principal structures. And the lot itself, which was part of a filed subdivision map, is only 60 by 120 feet. So when you apply the 30-foot setback on both sides, she's left with a building envelope that's only
0.
20 feet wide. Well, it's 20 feet wide.
Okay.
But the existing house, most of the existing house, which was built in 1932, is not within the setbacks or the required setbacks under today's code. So she essentially needs 2 areas of relief here. One is front yard setback relief, both for the second floor, which is going to be on the existing footprint, and for a broadening of the existing front porch She's seeking to make the front porch a little broader, but it will be no closer to the street than the existing porch. It's going to have the same setback, albeit it'll be a little bit wider. And she needs this because there's no good way of adding on to the house. And this is a small, tiny house, this 800 square foot house. It's much smaller than a typical ranch house today, and we're not even talking small by Hampton standards. It's small by any standard. It would be a small house in Topeka, Kansas. Anyway, the house is very small, and the basement is not at all, cannot be expanded, cannot be used for habitable area. It's too short. There's not enough height there. We gave some thought to adding on to the back, but as you can see, there's a very narrow building envelope in the back there. As I said, it's only 20 feet wide. It's sort of off to one side of the house, and it doesn't really add enough space back there to accommodate 2 decent-sized bedrooms and a bathroom. The neighborhood generally has 2-story houses all around it. One of the hand-ups that I'm going to pass up right now. In fact, to save time, I'll pass them all up at once. I have a handout that shows the house immediately next, here, pass it around. On the front, it shows 28 Willis Street, which is the house immediately next door, right next door on Willis Street. And on the top, it has 28 Willis Street as it was several years ago and as it is now. And as you can see, what they did there is very, very similar to what she plans to do, although the resulting house at 28 Willis Street has more gross floor area than she's proposing. It's a bigger house than she's proposing. But as you can see, it was roughly a 1.5-story house, and they raised up the roof, made a much bigger house. But my point is that it's in keeping with the neighborhood because it's pretty darn similar to what was done next door, except a little bit less. Next door, they didn't have the same problems that she has because they didn't have 2 front yards. And on the other side of that, you can see there's another 2-story house right adjacent to that. These are all the same size lots, 60 by 120, right down the row. And the last picture, you can see there's 3 in a row, and you can see that when this one raises up the roof, and by the way, the roof will only be 25 feet high. It won't be, it's way under the maximum permitted. They'll all be in keeping. I just want to show you too, because I think it's, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I didn't include with the packet that I submitted with the application the plans for the existing house. And so I just handed those up. You can see that it's 2 extremely tiny bedrooms, a small living room and a small kitchen with a tiny porch. That's the existing house. And she's got grown children and family and looks forward to retiring here and using this house as a modest home, but for her family. So other than and the other thing I want to point out about the front yard setbacks is there's an unusually wide verge on both streets here. On Warren Street, there's 19 feet, as I measure it, between the front property line and the pavement, and then a setback of 11 feet. So visually, on Warren Street, it will appear as if it's 30 feet setback. It's not actually set back that far from the property line. I don't argue that we need a variance, but I just want to, it won't have an appearance of looming over the neighborhood because there is that wide right-of-way that's village-owned. Similarly, on Willis Street, there's a good 12 feet to add to the 23-foot setback that's already there. So again, it'll feel like 30 feet, even if it isn't. So we need the front yard relief, And we need a variance from the pyramid law because on the Warren Street side, on the street side, again, not next to the neighbors, not near, on either of the adjacent lots, but on the street side, on Warren Street, because the existing setback is only 11 or so feet, there's a pyramid variance for 1,610 cubic feet for the second-story addition. That's about 9.6% of the entire house. And again, I want to stress that the new addition is going to be 4 feet 2 inches taller, that's it, than the existing structure, which is far less than the maximum height that it could be under the code. So it's going to be 25 2 inches. And I submit that given the fact that it's, again, that extra length over to Warren Street is not going to feel like it's in the sky plane, although it technically is. We also have an issue here, which I want to address, which is the 50% rule. The 50% rule we struggled with a lot, but given the fact that most of this first floor is in a non-conforming location, given the fact that they have 2 front yards and are very constrained by that, and that the expansion is only going to add 746 square feet to what is only now 833 square feet of living space. There's really no way to address that hardship that makes more sense than this. I spent a lot of time in my application on some of the criteria that you have to consider, the character of the neighborhood. There is, the houses immediately adjacent to it are of a similar size or actually a bit larger. The benefit to the applicant cannot be achieved by any other way. And part of the benefit that she seeks is cost, too. She's, not a wealthy woman, and by building on the existing foundation and using the existing foundation, she not only gets a little more house, but also has the advantage of using the existing foundation. And as you know, building out a new foundation out the back would add considerably to the cost of the house and would obliterate her backyard. It's really the only backyard. Our submission is that the relief sought is not substantial. And here you have to, I think, take a look at what the allowable gross floor area would be. Even on this tiny lot, the allowable gross floor area would be 2,363 square feet. And what we're proposing at the end of this renovation is only 1,579 square feet. I mean, I think nowadays a standard cookie-cutter ranch, 3-bedroom ranch house is often 1,600 square feet. And we're going to have less than that. So it does exceed the 50% limitation because we're adding a second story. But I'm going to argue that in this particular instance, it's not substantial when you consider how very, very small the existing dwelling is, that it has already some mass on the second floor, not enough to live in. But it's only going to raise up like 4 feet. Yep, 4 feet 2 inches over what's there now in terms of the ridge height.
The expansion would be what percent? It says 39% here. Did you just say it was going to be more than 50?
Yeah, the total expansion is 89%. It exceeds the 50% by 39%.
Oh, by 39%.
Yeah.
But if you knocked it down, you could build a house, you're gonna have 1,400 square feet when you're done. You could build a house 2,000 square feet, is that what you said?
No, I don't think you could, because Well,
you-
maybe you could.
You said the code would allow you to build,
Oh, that's the maximum gross floor area if you just took the gross floor area calculation.
Right.
Without layering on the 2 front yard setbacks.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's the combination of the 2 front yard setbacks, together with the location of the existing house that really provides a double whammy here. And I am very aware of the fact that the board pays attention to that 50% expansion relief, and we talked about it a great deal I talked about it a great deal with Ms. Colessa and with her architect. His name is Peter Podlis. And he thought about some alternatives, but there's nothing. For example, you can see in the middle of the house, there is an existing stairway going up to that second half story, the half story. There is an existing stairway. It's right in the middle of the house. So the only thing that makes sense is to use that same stairwell. There's no point in, creating a new stairwell. And really, which is right up the center of the house, that leaves you either side kind of small rooms. But that's all she's looking for. If you go out the back, you end up with 9 by 10 bedrooms, basically, with the necessary hallway space and 1 bathroom back there. So there wasn't none of the other alternatives which we thought about really work at all. So I'm going to urge you to consider this application for all the reasons that I've given you, and I'm here to answer any questions, as is Mrs. Colessa.
Well, the problem is you have a very small lot. and
Tiny lot.
You've got 2 problems right there.
Yeah, very small lot, but it's same size as the lots all along here. It was a major subdivision. It's a filed map, and they're all 60 by 120. A couple of the lots are double that, because some of them over time have been merged, but that's not the case here. It's been in the family since 1932. There's certainly no self-created hardship. It's also a very out-of-the-way kind of neighborhood. I'm sure you're all familiar with it,
Oh, yeah.
but it's tucked back in a corner almost.
I mean, the only thing that concerns me is the 89%. That
I understand your concern, and that's why we really spent a couple of extra months working with the architect, working with the surveyors, fiddling with that building envelope, figuring out how we could make a reasonable size house. I mean, she doesn't have the money to, this is not a tear down. She's going to use the existing, not only the foundation, but the first floor of the house, the stairwell, the whole thing. She doesn't have the money to go in and bulldoze everything and build new. That's not who we're talking about. It often is in this village, but not in this case.
I know it's over the 50%, but it's not picky. It's not like some of these that we get that just to have volume to have volume. The house is still only 1,400 square feet after you're all done.
It's true. Jerry?
No.
Rick?
Just 2 data points, and then maybe a question. The architect floor plan,
On the proposed?
yes.
Yes.
On the proposed first floor plan, it just tells us the square footage of the tiny addition.
The 88 square feet?
Yes. It
Right.
doesn't tell us what the total floor area of the proposed first floor will be. We have the second floor at the bottom, 658, but nowhere on the plan is the actual total floor area of the proposed first floor.
Well, on the proposed first floor?
May I approach?
Yeah,
You know, all I'm asking is that.
I think I have it somewhere with me, so.
May I approach?
Oh,
I
this
have
is Margaret
another-
Colessa.
I have a different drawing that he sent to me. We will probably have to adjust that, but this gives you the square footage.
Okay, I know roughly what the square footage is from the application. 'Cause
Right.
Linda gave
Do
that
you-
to us.
Right,
Well-
but this is from the architect.
We-
So if I can submit this for.
Oh,
the
yeah,
record-
what I'm asking you
Yeah,
to do is to submit, and I'm going to ask you for one other thing, too.
yeah.
Just have the architect add the total floor area of the proposed first floor.
Okay.
What are we going to end up with?
This, I'll tell you what this says, and I'm ready to submit this for the record.
Okay, is there
It's
more than
from
one?
the architect.
Is there more than one?
Is there more than one copy?
No, there's just one copy.
No, there's just one copy.
Because there's one other thing that I'm going to ask you to do.
Okay, what's the other thing?
The elevation plan,
Mhm.
again on the proposed,
Mhm.
it depicts the pyramid law data,
Mhm.
which is the variance you're asking for, which is
Mhm.
good, we have that. What it doesn't show us, at least I can't see it anywhere, is the actual height of the proposed
Oh,
house.
yeah, it is on there, I think, and let me. I know it's 25 feet 2 inches. And if you have this as part of your application?
No. Well,
Yeah.
I'll show you what I have. I have this,
Yes,
A1.
right, and on A1, it says at the top, it shows you the 30 feet. Oh, I see what you're saying. It
The
shows you the
30 feet is the front
feet.
yard setback.
No, this.
That's showing us the front
Right,
yard setback.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is a pyramid law diagram.
Right.
You're not asking for a height variance,
No.
but I think it would help your case.
Okay.
You've
That-
indicated that this is not going to be a high house.
It's
not
not.
going to be as high as it could be.
Okay,
I think that would be a helpful thing that
I will
Right,
put.
even though you need a pyramid law variance, you are actually going to be X feet below the permitted height. If that's true,
That's right.
and I think that would help.
That's right.
What we got to do is,
I understand.
we have to come up with grounds to get beyond the 50% clause. And I think some of the data you've given us is helpful, but I think if we had it, those two things right on the plans.
I totally understand, and I'm sure I could get those to you
And
this
then
week
one
before
more
your
thing
work
that I'm-
session.
One more thing I'm going to ask you to do is, okay, you've given us some photos of existing houses, et
Mhm.
cetera, with street addresses, et cetera, which is very helpful. Pictures speak 1,000 words. But if you could maybe give us a tax map sheet.
I thought I did. It's got the addresses on it so that you can compare the photographs to the, I'll show you what's. After the page that says existing conditions, on this, you've got, well, it's from the filed subdivision map. It's not the tax map, it's the filed subdivision map for the subdivision that created this lot and all the ones around it. And it has, the numbers on it are, wait a minute, those are the lot numbers. The addresses are on the following page on the map from the GIS.
Okay, if you could, even if it's just putting it in summary form so we don't have to hunt for it.
Okay, here it is.
What I'm trying to.
I'll submit it again.
But let me finish my question.
Okay.
Okay. There are X number of two-story houses in the immediate neighborhood. I would like the record to show which lots have two-story houses in the immediate neighborhood, is what I'm trying to get at. And it's all here if we hunt around for it.
Okay.
So even if you just give us a summary sheet,
Mhm.
tax map, so-and-so,
Mhm.
street address, two-story house. So we'll have that without having to hunt around for it.
Okay.
Because the board has in the past, on occasion, not very often, gone beyond the 50% limitation. And if the board finds that a two-story house is warranted, obviously you have to go over the 50% clause. So that's why I'm,
Okay.
as much ammunition as you can give us to get over that 50% clause.
I will get that to you. I can get it to you well before the work session, your next work session meeting.
15.
That's the 15th, so I can get it to you well before the 15th if we can, well, it's up to you. Do you think you?
Everything that we've asked for is already in the record. I'm just looking for it in a better format. As far as I'm concerned, we can close it for decision, subject to the written submission that we requested. Okay,
I will get that to you.
okay.
I'll get it all to you.
Hopefully, it's not urgent that there be a decision at the next meeting?
Well, that's a hard one for me to answer because she has no heat there because of the water damage, so she was kind of.
Problem with,
He's going to be away.
I'm going to be away until
Yeah.
about 2 days before the next
Right.
meeting.
Yeah.
So I don't know that
I
I'll have
understand.
time, 2 days, in the day and a half that I'm back, to get a decision done.
I understand, and I'm sure you do the best you can.
Okay. If you actually got me a set of everything early next week, maybe I'd have time to look at it next week.
You will get everything early next week.
Okay. Okay.
Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to be heard? If not,
And we'll be closed for decision.
yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Now we can all go home, right?
Yeah, that's done.
This stuff together.
Thank you very much.
That closes this session of the South Hampton Village Zoning Board of Appeals for the month of August 2015.